díomh go léir agus fáilte róbhasteach. Tá sé ag stalabastí lasmuid ach tá míad go léir go sonna sósta an stasa in anad phobal i Kinvara a Guntain na Gaillimhe. I know that Bridget mentioned there that it was an honour having me, but it's an honour for me to be here. I think the first gig I got when I came back from the UK about 4 years ago was actually to the Winterage event, driving cattle in the burn, and I met Bridget there and I met Brendan there, and it reminded me of why I'd come home and why I wanted to start farming, because farmers were so positive, and it was the type of farming that I'd seen as a child growing up and that I wanted to be a part of. So it's a real honour to be here, and it's a real honour to be chairing this discussion as well, because I think we all know that there are massive challenges facing agriculture, economic, climatic as well, but part of this event, it's a really powerful thing to see that there are solutions there as well. And the 4 panellists, I think, that we see in front of us are part of the solution, or some of part of the solution. I won't put too much pressure on them today. Now, I hate dull panel discussions, so to get a bit of energy in the room, I want another big round of applause, Bula Blas, for the panellists, please. And what you see in front of you are 4 organic dairy farmers. There are just 61 organic dairy farmers in the country, so this is nearly 6% of the entire cohort that you have in front of you. So think about that next time you're going to get your litre of organic milk. So I'm going to ask them all to kind of briefly introduce themselves and what they're up to, and start thinking of questions in your head as well. And I'm going to go to John McHugh down there first, because it's interesting, John, when I was reading your bio that you converted in kind of 2015, 2016, and if we think in the historical context of that, that is when dairy quotas were lifting, and there's this kind of like big inhalation of breath because everyone was about to ramp up their dairy production. You pulled a handbrake turn and decided to go a different way. So why was that? And a bit of background about yourself there.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Yeah, so John McHugh, farming just outside Portlaoise in Clondarrick. Yeah, and I'm milking 50 cows now. I think every time I talk at one of these, I'm milking a few less cows than I was. So in 2015, I decided to go organic. And the reason, I think every time I answer the reason why, I give a different answer, but there was lots of reasons why. I suppose the previous years I had done a lot of expansion. I had moved from, I suppose, 35 cows when I inherited the farm up to 160 cows, and had plans of milking 200 cows, and had spoke to neighbours about renting their farms and looking at second farms, and all of the kind of things that were almost becoming popular and encouraged to do, I suppose, within discussion groups, and kind of, I suppose, being ambitious about developing your business. And I suppose in 2015 it started just feeling like the whole thing was a little bit of a rat race, which kind of triggered just a whole process of thought and asking questions, I suppose. It all started with a question, I suppose, and just asking questions about what are you doing this for, what, where is this taking you, and then just started looking into organic as well. And once I started that process and researching about organic, and it just triggered off a lot of thoughts in my mind, and it just felt a lot more right for me, I suppose. It matched up a lot more with what I felt. I felt before I was just following the herd, I suppose, a little bit, and this just felt completely right to me. So from that moment, I was at an event in Clare, Galway, actually, on soils. That was a year of the soils, I think, in 2015. And yeah, I went away from that 100% convinced I was going to go organic. Yeah.
That was it, the road of Damascus moment, if you like. Yeah. I guess your farm, in the context of farming, though, is quite large. I think it's about 230 acres, if I'm right. And then to go down to the other end of the spectrum, then Mimi, you're a Tipperary woman by way of the United States, and I guess you came back with your husband, and it was this kind of homestead idea that you had maybe in your head of being kind of self-sufficient on 28 acres. And for a lot of people out there, that is the ideal kind of in their head, that they have this dream of coming back. Was it everything that you thought it would be when you were coming home?
That and more. It's been lovely. I do kind of say, but we're not farmers. Like, my background is in environmental geophysics, and my husband is in carpentry, and in some ways, that allowed us to do whatever we wanted and make our own mistakes and not feel like we were part of the rubric that had to be the way to go or follow the herd. There was this saying somebody said to me early on, it said, don't let anybody should all over you, which is, I've always liked, because everybody will tell you what you should do. And there's not, that doesn't fit every person. So we kind of looked at the landscape more as what we could do to enhance it, to provide for us in our community. That was our look at it when it comes to sort of diversity. So we wanted to produce our own food. We wanted to produce food for our local community. We wanted to forage, what we could from the hedgerows and things. So it was all about just sort of looking at it that way and what we could provide both for ourselves. I mean, it's kind of it's a fool's notion to think you can be completely self-sufficient in this day and age. But just to be able to sort of be a bit more holistic in our thinking, a bit more cyclic in our work and things, yeah.
And there's dairy cattle, there's shorthorns that you're milking, there's beef cattle as well. Is there about 1,000?
I kind of laugh when people call us dairy farmers, so we milk, John's going to be down to our size soon, we milk 10 to 12 cows, depending on the year. So we have a micro dairy where we do it's raw milk and raw cream and buttermilk. So very old-fashioned comparatively, but yeah. So that's why I laugh when people call us dairy farmers, because we raise about 20 pigs a year, and we do about 1,000 broilers as well, and we do ducks for eggs. So those all fit into our sort of holistic rotation of that we feed pigs with skim milk, that they have mobile homes that move up the hedgerows. We have chickens and chicken tractors that follow behind our cows in a grazing rotation. So everything fits together. There's no dead ends that way.
That's great. And well, not dead ends, but bookends. They were bookended by two Limerick men on either side. Gearoid, I guess John talked about kind of like that road to Damascus moment. I mean, when did that happen for you, or what was the draw to organic dairy?
Well, I suppose firstly just I suppose I'm the outlier here that I'm not actually in organics. So
sorry, I'll sack the researcher.
Just that I clarify that. But I suppose, I suppose I was always into nature growing up. And I suppose when I went to Ag College, we had, coming out of Ag College, we had the Food 2020 harvest, and it was to increase food production by 50%. And there was grants for more sheds and more cows, and we'd be farming, kind of the ground at home would be heavy. So my father and the generation before me always felt that the land had a limit where we're farming anyway. And when I came out of college, I kind of said, look, I can change that, and we were going to drive on production and milk as many cows as we could. But my father kind of said, sure, work away, you'll find your own feet. So after a few years of taking over the farm, I realised that, that my forefathers were right, that the land had a limit, and that I could only get, a certain amount out of it. And I felt that at that stage, the discussion groups that I was involved in and the organisations that I was involved in were all pushing on production, and I kind of looked at what my farm could do, and I suppose what my cows were doing, and I kind of took a different path. I suppose it's not that I scaled back, but I went on what the old values of farming. So like the old rule of thumb was, back in the day, was a cow to the acre, and we've a fragmented farm, so I did look at organics, and the grazing block at home is only 80 acres, and it is heavy land, so we wouldn't have a long grazing season. So organics wasn't a viable option, but I did feel that with the type of cow, with the right type of cow, a low maintenance cow, and a kind of a grazing system that with reduced inputs, that was the way forward on my farm. So like, just to compare with your typical commercial farm of, say, might be spreading 250 kilos of nitrogen, I think the most I'd spread would be 140 kilos. So, and even next year we'd be hoping to reduce that down to 100. Like, we're looking at putting in multi-species and things like that to reduce the amount of nitrogen, but we have, like, I suppose, in terms of our pasture, then, like most of the ground that the cows graze is all pasture. There is some reseeding, but it's not a focus. Same with our silage. We know how much to produce for the milking cows, and we know how much to produce for the dry cows. And what we do for the dry cow silage is we've traditional hay meadow. So we half the silage ground is left till the end of July, and that's for the ground nesting birds and stuff and things like that. That's kind of trying to do things in a different way, but it's in an industry where it's kind of productivity driven. It can be seen as being inefficient at times, but
That's one word that's used. I think it's misused. But coming as well to Thomas Stack at the end, I've had the privilege of visiting Thomas's farm as part of the Farming for Nature, and I've rarely met a farmer as enthusiastic about what he's doing. Thomas is like a pioneer in the industry, who doesn't know, for the Korean natural farming method. It's incredible. But Tom, do you just want to talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, my name is Thomas Stack. I farm in Ballygrant, County Limerick, Summerhill Natural Dairy Farm. I suppose, I practice Korean natural farming. I suppose it all started in 18. I was after, I suppose I'll give you a short story. I suppose I was, adding cost-wise and production. I was thinking, what's it all for? And if you remember, 18 was a drought, a very bad drought. And I was there and I was pulling my hair out, like, what was I doing? Spreading fertilizer during the day and going out with water at night time. And I was like, what am I at? So I sat back and I just said, there must be some other way. And basically made a few phone calls and went to a biofarm conference in Tullamore. And I suppose after 4 or 5 hours, I just had to get out of there, because I knew then I was living a lie. And this man did a speech or a presentation, Dan Kittredge, David Wallace, these people, like, they're the stepping stones to kind of lead me to where I am today. And basically after that, I left after 4 hours with temper, and I said, what am I doing here? This is a pinnacle moment in my life, I suppose, and bought a box of cigarettes, and I smoked 4, and I said, this is either going to be, excuse my language, shit or bust. So I went back in and I learnt, and the only 2 things I learnt in that day was, Dan Kittredge said, you could start by seawater, and there's this thing called Korean natural farming, and that's a whole different ball game. And I said, bang.
Yeah, no, some people will be like, oh yeah, no, grand, I'll go to a conference. Like most of us will go to a conference. Oh, that's a nice idea. We'll go home and Google it. You didn't just go home and Google it. You changed your production system completely.
So basically, I went on to John, and I swear to God, I read my first book when I was 40, and that was farming, fertility farming, by can't get it. Human Turner, and that was another stepping. But from that, then I met Nikki, and she said, "Sit down now, Tom." My wife is over there, and she said, "Take it all in," and I did, and I did about 4 weeks at nights with Fair Juicer. Just internet, YouTubing, Korean natural farming, Dan Kittredge, seawater. And you're in a panic, because when you're in that conventional side, you just think, how is my grass going to grow? Because in 1997, I did my farm year, and I was like, there was no connection with the farm. And basically, I think in this day and age, and with production, that maybe that's what we're losing, is the connection between the farm and the land. And basically, I got back into that, and then I knew my path, and so I could tell a few stories.
We'll get to that, don't we?
But Korean natural farming is a way of, I improve we tend to microbial life of the soil by being self-sufficient. And basically, there's the most important thing of Korean natural farming is indigenous microorganisms, IMO. And basically, if everyone closed their eyes here and think of a beautiful place that's near you in a woodland, all you do is you take a box of rice, you scrape back the soil, and you make a collection of indigenous microorganisms. And basically, you take that home, you breed it out, and basically what I do, you bring it to IMO2. I know there's a lot, what I'm telling you here is that, but basically I spread out my land, and there's other inputs. It's amazing to see how healthy, because basically I treat my farm like I treat my kids, and my cows like my kids, and the whole thing, it's all in a circle, because you know, you have your gut, and I like everything that we make in Cree natural farming, you can actually give it. If I can't take it, my soil doesn't get it, or my cows don't get it. So the cycle is clean, and it's all about microbial gut, and you know, that level of healthiness, I suppose. But it's out there, but it's the best part about Cree natural farming is I suppose it's like, the word doesn't come to me, but I suppose it's cost effective. It's cost you nothing to be sustainable, and I think that's the word in the next 10 years in dairy farming in Ireland, and every farming is be sustainable and be self-sufficient inside your own door, inside your own walls, and that's what I am. And my dad always said self-praise is no praise, but it's what we've been through in 3 years would be a lifetime. But it's mind-blowing, the power of a thing that you can't even see. You can only see it under a microscope. So that's me. Yeah.
No, it's incredible. I think you touched upon something there that's really important, or all of you did as well, is this kind of connection with the soil and this kind of cycle that you're putting in place. But I guess the title of the discussion today is also about sales and production as well. And, you know, a lot of the time, people say, well, I can't marry productive farming with kind of farming for the environment, or farming with nature in mind. And I'm actually really glad there's a conventional dairy farmer here, because I don't think that's true. And even at home, I look at the dairy farmers around me, and especially with fertilizer prices at the minute, if anyone realizes they're basically skyrocketing, they're doubling, and everyone's looking at clover suddenly. You know, lads who would never have heard of it before are suddenly into multi-species swords, and that's really nice to see. But I mean, for you, Gearoid, at home, is that like a big part of it? Because, you know, do you have to be an organic farmer to be able to make money and farm with nature in mind as well?
No, like I suppose when I was nominated for this award, I was kind of like, sure, I'm just your regular Joe Soap farmer, but I suppose like what I do, I suppose I go against the grain a bit of, like, if you take breeding, say, I focus on kind of the old type British Frisian cow. She's a low and medium sized cow. We've pedigree cows, so like I'm interested in the breeding. I look back at the cow families, and it's only more of an interest as well. But the reason for that cow is Frisians in general are naturally fertile, so we'd have a very low empty rate. We have a low replacement rate. They're a low maintenance cow. We'd have very little mastitis, which in turn we haven't eliminated our antibiotics, but say for our dry period, out of 80 cows, we'd only give an antibiotic to, I think, 16 of them last year. But that wasn't just giving that cow an antibiotic. It was, we would have taken a milk sample and got it tested, and the vet would have come out and prescribed an antibiotic. So I didn't willy-nilly just say, right, I'm going to give that cow an antibiotic. But in terms then of the clover, I've stopped using spray. I haven't used the spray in the last 2 to 3 years. And what I've noticed is, because I've reduced my nitrogen, the old clover is starting to come back, and it's coming back in droves, like. And I suppose with that, it's really kind of with the clover coming back, we're also seeing a few weeds, as they call them, but they're not. I wouldn't call them as weeds, even though my neighbours would say that I'm starting to get. The perception is, when people look at my farm now compared to what it was, they'd say that I'm getting lazy, or I'm getting laxed because there's weeds starting to come back into the sward. But like, those weeds have a value, like have a biodiversity value. But I suppose what I'm trying to say is that this manicured farm, you know, it costs money, and it also adds a pressure to the farmer, because you have to have, it's very hard to keep things looking right. But if you can just, like, nature will provide the space. And what I like doing, I'm involved in a lot of discussion groups, and I host them on my farm. And farmers might, when they come to the walk, they might say, oh, sure, this guy, he's only I'll use the word half-arsed. You know, they might see a lot of weeds along the fences and stuff. But what I like to do then after the farm is show them my milk records. And at the moment, my herd is ranked within the top 10% of herds in Dairygold. So, like, it can be done, like, but you just have to do a lot more homework. Like, you have to be, like, farming is a business. You just have to be more organised. Like, we'd be watching when our slurry is filling and when can we go. We're watching the weather. We're not, you know, we're really sparing the slurry. I'm calling slurry now, even though it was always a fertiliser, but it's the new. We spread for slurry now, like we spread our fertiliser. So we've reduced our application of fertiliser by using just slurry alone, and it's things like that. Knowing the size of your fields, knowing your application rate. That's, if you don't know what rate you're putting your slurry out at, like, that's having an impact. Same with your fertiliser. Like, we invested in GPS to spread the fertiliser because I just wasn't able to spread it accurately enough. I wanted to keep out from the drains. I wanted to lower if I wanted to go out with 5 units of nitrogen as opposed to 30 units, it was impossible to do that without GPS, and now I can do that. And you can see now in my fields around the perimeter, like, there's very little grass growth because it's not getting that nitrogen. But there is a lot going on there, but it's things like that, you know, that.
Those are maybe some good things that are coming in the Common Agricultural Policy. That the next one is that there's meant to be more money for GPS systems for spreading fertiliser, and also there's going to be €1 million next year for about 20,000 acres of multi-species swards as well. So I know there's a lot of negativity around it, but there is some positive ones. And Mimi, you're slightly different than everyone else in terms of your route to market. Can you just tell us, how do you sell your milk, or where does it go to? And are you profitable? I know it's a rude question to ask, but does it work out for you in the end?
It does, yeah, absolutely. It's very profitable for us on 28 acres to make a family living. And I will caveat that with, I kind of always say we could never have one enterprise and have that one enterprise be the enterprise that then is the income for the farm. You probably could when it comes to the milk and the butter and the cream, but you'd have to work a lot harder. I'd have to work a lot harder to make sales if I just wanted to specialize in one product. It's a lot easier for us to direct sell to people and to retailers when we have a variety of products. So I came from the milk market this morning. We have a stall there on Saturdays. I can sell people milk, cream, butter, buttermilk, chickens, pork, beef, the entire lot. I can sell them eggs. So it's a well-rounded diet for people as well. So we sell some of our things direct. We sell a portion of the dairy through retailers as well. Sheridan's Cheesemongers is a pretty big one for us. Some independent health food shops, all in sort of independent shops, not anything big, massive, just because we strictly don't have the quantity and we have over demand for what we can supply.
But in terms of red tape, did you find it hard in terms of at the beginning setting up? Was there a lot of red tape?
I suppose the irony is we've been doing raw milk since 2000, and so we produced it for our local community, started in 2014, 15. And there was at that time only maybe 1 if 2 other people doing it, and it wasn't regulated in Ireland. So it had been kept legal in the EU, but there was no Irish regulation around raw milk. Ironically, there was around cream and butter, so we have been regulated since we started, but it was a lot easier for us than it is now, I think, to get started, because no one else was doing it. And now, if you want to start, there is regulation there. There are things there that are in place. It's a natural food. It's like anything. I think the department's a little bit afraid of it still, but, well, actually the department are pretty good. The FSAI, maybe not so much, kind of afraid of it, but Darina was very instrumental in keeping it, legal in Ireland. The people, Kevin Sheridan and those lads who are into raw milk cheese and those other things that we don't produce, they were very instrumental in making sure that we then had a route to market. So we benefited from all the hard work that a lot of other people did in that realm. So yeah. There is red tape there. There's a lot of, you do have to test a lot, and you want to ensure that you're feeding people a healthy product, but it's a real natural food as well. So, yeah.
And in terms of the guys at the end, you're both Glenisk suppliers, and then we have a Dairy Gold supplier as well. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but price per litre on organic milk, am I right around the 60 cent per litre mark, give or take, depending on winter milk, spring milk supply? Oh, look at their faces, typical dairy farmer.
Yeah, so in the winter time with Glenisk, it's 60 cent a litre, so for 5 winter months. And so their summer price would be 37 cent a litre. So, but then both Thomas and me are in a grass-fed only scheme. So Glenisk just launched this year. They launched grass-fed only and certified by the Irish Organic Association. And so essentially, you're not allowed to feed any grains, any concentrate feed. So the farms are, they're producing all the milk off their own resources, I suppose. And that's a flat 50 cent a litre around the year. Well, it's from February to November. It's a seasonal product as well. So Glenisk were supposed to launch that into the German market. They had essentially just launched it in before the fire. So that's a little bit up in the air now, but yeah.
And Gearoid, another rude question. It's around 30 cent excluding VAT, average dairy prices usually, depending on spring, winter.
It depends. Yeah. So at this point in time, excluding VAT, it's I think it's 34. But I suppose this time of the year, when your milk solids are good, you'll be looking at a kind of 40-45 cent a litre at the moment.
There's, I think, 200 million more euro going into the organic scheme. You're not tempted to switch over to that, lads, to get a bump?
You see, where I'm kind of, I suppose I have a small grazing block, and it's heavy ground, and we'd only be grazing for maybe 240 days, and I suppose I felt that with heavy ground in it, clover is harder to establish. Now we are getting there, but it is harder, and there's no point in saying it's easy grow on heavy ground. I felt that when you do go organic, your feed costs are higher, and if we at home got a bad spring or a wet winter or a wet summer, and we had to feed concentrate. Now we don't feed much concentrate at present, but if we did, you're talking it's double the price for organic feed. And same again, your cows don't get the same amount of yield in an organic situation. So I kind of trashed it out. So my way was kind of to go as close to organic as I could, but still, if weather events changed, I'd still be able to work around. While it's it's the same with, we'd feed a lot of silage in the winter time, and to produce good silage you do need an element of nitrogen. It's a bit like putting a bit of salt in your dinner. Like you don't need a lot, but you do need an element to get the protein up in your silage. And if you want the cows to milk efficiently indoors, you need high quality silage. So it was those kind of things, and I like to think that I am close to organic, but not organic.
You have a bit of a safety net there if you want.
Exactly. Yeah. Once you go full, I just felt I'd loved, in my heart I'd love to be in organics, but I just feel that the ground and the type of ground and the size of the ground that I have, it wouldn't be feasible.
But I think it's like an important point to make as well, that you can farm as close to organics if you want, but you don't actually have to be organic. And not every farm is going to suit an organic production system as well. Every farm is different, no matter where you are in the country. So different things going to suit them. I know Tom and John as well. That's something that hangs over people when they're thinking of switching to organics if they have livestock, is the cost of feed. Because we talk about importing a couple of million tons of protein, soy from places like South America, but then I hear about organic farmers bringing lucerne over from Italy because it's really hard for them and it's expensive for them to bring organic feed over, and Ireland isn't very suited. We can't grow soy. We can grow lupins, but no one really is growing organic lupins except Thomas Foohey, if he's here. So how do you find it, John, in terms of the concentrates?
Easy because I'm not feeding any. But I suppose in the past our farm was a mixed farm, so in theory, I could grow my own concentrates, and I did. I was growing oats for the last few years, but I didn't even feed them in the last 2 years.
But does that have a massive impact on the amount of milk that you produce, and then in terms of the massive impact on the milk that you can sell, and then your profit margins as well? I can see you shaking your head, Tom. I'll get to you in a second. Don't worry.
So it can have an impact. It will have an impact. So mainly, I suppose in the springtime, if you get really bad weather, and if you can introduce concentrates at that time of year, you can generally, get the cows onto a higher yield. But I suppose the whole thing, productivity really is outputs minus inputs, and so all them inputs have a cost. And as you said, there's a bigger cost than just the financial. Obviously, within organic, there's a much bigger financial cost than in conventional, but even that financial cost doesn't necessarily represent the true cost of these things. So importing soya from South America, we know there's lots of other costs associated with that, be it deforestation or palm kernel coming in from Southeast Asia, and there's even health implications to some of these as well. In increasing animals are going to be much more likely to pick up parasites. They're going to be more likely to get mastitis. There's lots of unseen costs associated with that. So for me, it's not a huge issue. I think cows can still, within a grass-fed system, 4,500, 5,000 litres is still achievable on 100% grass. You're going to be more weather dependent, if weather really if you got a particularly bad year, that could be more affected, but it's still quite achievable. And I think it's probably a big question that in the whole sustainability debate, I think concentrates hasn't featured maybe as strongly as it should have, we can in the country as a whole and within the beef systems as well, we can do a lot more with just grass, I think.
I think John touched upon it there in terms of herd health and parasites. And Tom, something I was really impressed with when I went to your farm was your overall herd health and just the look of contentment on his cattle as well when you saw them in the fields. I mean, that was something you found, wasn't it, when you switched? So
basically, we going on with John. There's an ad on television at the moment, and it's one of the boards, and it's we farm from the ground up. Well, we're totally wrong because we have to farm from the ground down. Because basically, if your soil is in a healthy condition, it produces a way more rich, nutritious grass. And basically, I believe, I've done it for 3 years since I changed over. I walked everything off a cliff. I'm grass-fed, milk from babies to maybe 8-9 months. I give them their milk, and then I add them to the grass. So they're grass-fed all the way. I believe that the soil is the key. And I believe in wet ground or whatever, once your microbial life, and it takes 3 years. I believe that they're all on about this, climate change. We're bringing feed from all over the world to feed how many cows in this country. I believe that, in my opinion, I believe that the grass here is fed from above, and that's what's feeding all these cows. But what happens the day that they can't get their fertilizer or farmers can't pay? The farmer is going to pay at the end of the day. It's not the big companies, and this is my opinion. But I think a cow, and you're more than welcome to come to see my cows. They are self-sufficient. They are healthy animals with grass-fed, and John rang me during the year saying that there could be, or the start of the year, about for the grass, that Glenis were going to do it, and I don't know, what did I look into a genie ball 3 years ago, because I could kind of, yes, I made mistakes, but I believe that cows can be fed grass alone.
Well, they're ruminants. They're meant to be fed grass alone. Yeah. So.
But the grass has to be nutritious.
Yes.
I think as well, last night I was at a protest in Pearl Smart with a lot of farmers and the Minister for Agriculture, and something that he said was that we collectively needed to be less dismissive of organic farming, and not even just organic farming, but just kind of techniques around organic farming, like clover use and multi-species boards. I think there's a story that sums it up, though, Tom, if you tell me about your trip to Ballybunion when you went to get seawater for your fields, if you tell us that story.
So on the madness of that, Dan Kittredge, he said, get seawater. So I'm fairly stubborn, but after walking everything off a cliff, and I did, but I said, right, okay, so I've dried off all the cows. I'll tell you 2 stories. I did a homeopathy course in Cork, and there's this, probably shouldn't be telling it, but I'll tell it. I knew the remedy. It was, what was it for drying off? What was it called? Urea. And you see, there's different potencies in homeopathy. And I said, right, my 2 days in the course, and I said, right, I'm drying off my cows, I don't care, this is what I'm going to do. So I went away and I dried off my cows, I gave them 200C. So I went out the following morning, there was milk everywhere, right? So this is in November, right? It was around the 4th or 5th of November. There was milk everywhere. And I went to the course that day, and I went up to the teachers, the lecturers, and said, excuse my name, what the fuck, you're telling me use urea? And they go, what potency? And I said 200, and they started laughing at me So I had about 65 cows at home with milk everywhere, right? And they go home tonight, right? Give them aconite and give them 6C, urea 6C. Within 4 days, they were dry, right? I had 6 problems. 6 of them got dry cow mastitis. And this was one of my things that really proved to me that I went in with BBU is belladonna, urea, and I can't think the other one, Bellis, I think, for the dry cow mastitis, sprayed them in their nose, came out the next morning, and out of the 6, 5 are cured. That's one story. The second story is about the seawater. So I went to Ballybunion with 2,000 litres or 2 IBC tanks. So you just have to think outside the box what you do but so I'm back anyway, and I was there, you turn left, you go towards Ballyduff, I'd say. And there's this big bridge. I still go there to this day, and filled up my IBC tanks, because I bought a pump about 6 years ago for what? I don't know, but I know why I bought it. And a guy was walking the kind of bit of a strand, and I said, how things, blah, blah, blah. And he says, what are you doing And I says, I'm taking seawater. And he says, what are you at And I said, I'm transitioning to organic dairy, and I'm trying to use seawater to improve my soil fertility, and hadn't a clue really what I was doing, but I was doing it. And he says, what else? He says, I'm a vet. He says, I started homeopathy. And that was it. The conversation stopped. So I filled up my stuff and was going in towards Listowel. And next thing I see the guards on behind me. I said, oh no. So I had an Ivor Williams trailer, but I knew there was one dodgy light in it. So the lights came on and he pulled me in, and I said, fucking done here. And so he walks up to the side, rolled down the window, and he says, will you tell me, he says, what the F are you doing? And I said, what do you mean? He says, what are you doing? We got a report in the station. And I said, was he a vet? And he said, probably. And he wouldn't tell me, but he said, what are you doing? I said, I'm transitioning to organic. There's this man called Dan Kittredge. He taught me to get seawater, and there's a process. And he looks at me, and he shook my hand, and he says, best of luck, Shaw. And then he said to me, he says, will you go away and fix the back left light? So that's that one.
That was a great one. But I think that there is resistance out there in different forms. But I think as well, a thing that was touched upon in the last panel discussion was advisory services. And I'm not looking to kick anyone in particular, but if I ring up tomorrow morning and say that I want to switch to dairy farming, I'll have an advisor out like that. If I say that I want to try the Korean natural farming method, I will likely have the guards called on me. So is there a problem there? We talked about knowledge transfer should actually be called knowledge sharing. I mean, for you on the panel, I don't know who wants to take this, but is there a problem there with education as well? John, do you want to go?
Yeah, so I suppose the first thing, I know Mimi said at the very start, don't let anyone should all over you. and I think as farmers, we're all very, and particularly now I can empathize with any farmer. There's so much talk about so many issues, and there's a sense of, finger pointing and blame. And no one likes to be really told what to do or be forced, kind of, their hand forced, I suppose. And for me, I'm very glad I changed when I did change, because I would have probably had much more resistance changing now if I felt that I was being, forced by people. And there's so many, I suppose, mistruths and different things within the whole arguments that are playing out at the minute, or there's contradictory evidence on different things, and so it's a challenging time, I suppose. It's a much nicer way to move on your own accord than being kind of pushed. But so within that, look, we know there's very little promotion of organics from Teagasc to Borbia to, so it's everywhere within the system, I suppose. In some ways, organic, it's contradictory to Origin Green. So it's hard to promote sustainable Irish agriculture and then organic over here as more sustainable. Where is that division, I suppose? And so there's a slight conflict there that probably holds organic back to a certain extent. In other ways, there's huge amounts of information available now through the internet and there's so many books. There's all the information is there, I suppose, if you look for it. And National Organic Training and Skill Nets are host a huge amount of events and biofarms, and they brought over amazing speakers, and so all the information is kind of there now, and there is advisors within Teagasc as well, and there's elements within Teagasc that are very good on organics as well. So it is there, I suppose, if you seek it out.
Gearoid, for you, say when you were talking about doing farm walks and that kind of thing, I mean, what do farmers take away most, do you think, from that?
I suppose you get a lot of whispering and talking, and I know they're judging me, and I know they're saying this fella's at nothing, and but like the panel here, everyone's farm is different, and you kind of have to try and do your best with it. But from what I see, what it is, tis until you get the farmers on their own they listen to you. But when you have them in a group or a large group, I think a lot of it is some cohort of farmers just kind of throw their eyes up to heaven, because the advice out there is a lot of the advice still is higher stocking rates, higher milk solids, and the more milk solids you're producing, the lower your carbon footprint's going to be. And I was at a farm walk in Tipperary, and it was a signpost farm, and these signpost farms are supposed to be the leaders of how the farmers are supposed to progress. And this guy, he'd the same size farm as me, and he'd 80 acres, and he was milking 140 cows. He was stocked to the hilt. He was talking about growing clover, and he was hoping to reduce his nitrogen. But I was looking at it going, he's too many cows. He was never going to be able to reduce his nitrogen. Clover was never going to get a chance to grow, because the more nitrogen you put out, the grass takes over and the clover dies off. It was all a bit. I came away, a bit deflated, saying, is this what we're at this day and age, or where we are with climate change and everything? That we're still pushing this high stocking rate, high output farm, because they're going on a carbon footprint basis. That your more milk solids you produce, the less carbon you have. But it's kind of it's kind of gone down the paper exercise route, as opposed to what's actually like the panel are talking about here. It's what's going on beneath the soil, and how we protect our soils and all that. Because that's the fundamentals of farming. It's what you grow from the ground is how you is what determines how much money you make for yourself.
That touches upon what a lot of you said. I'm just wondering, Mimi, do you want to come in there? I saw
was
you
gonna
sigh.
say, no, I just, okay, like, we're very different. Our cows have names. I just also think it's you're dishonoring the animal's role in all of this as well. Do you know what I mean? When you just look at the commodity that they're producing and the max amount of stuff that they're doing, like, those animals historically, you know, ruminants, herbivores, they have a role within nature. Like, they do enhance the soil. They do things that, and to just look at it as it is a paper, you know, people look at it just a paper exercise. It's these numbers. I mean, people ask me, what's your protein and fat? I have absolutely no idea what those contents are in our milk, because people can look at a liter of milk in the bottle and see, wow, look at all the cream on top. And that's what matters, you know what I mean? And it tastes good. Like, I have not a notion what those things are, because they don't matter, do you know what I mean? But they do, I do understand if you're bigger and you're conventional and you're selling to the dairies, they do. But when you take the animal's role out of it as well, that's when you go just with efficiency. That's when we get ourselves into all of these problems.
I know there's been a lot of talk about it, and maybe not for you, but maybe for the guys on the panel, there's been a lot of talk about Board Bia's role in this, and if an organic Board Bia label as well, that they seem reluctant to introduce. Would that help your work?
It would make a difference, no.
No, okay. What about you guys? Do you think it would help?
I think it should make a difference. Like, I think there is a potential for a much bigger market there. You know, so some people say the market it's not there for beef and it's not there for, but I think if it was promoted, the market can easily be there. So yeah.
Okay. We have about 10 or 15 minutes left, and I want to open it up to questions. If people have questions, think about it. I have one more for the lads, if no one's going to stick up their hand yet. Oh no, we have a hand. Go on.
How much do you sell your milk for per litre?
Everybody wants to sell our milk now.
See, look, they don't want to tell you.
So it retails between €2.60 and €3 a litre.
There you go.
Butter is much more expensive.
Hello, how are you? Great panel and great to see the dairy. What would you think of suckler farming coming from the dairy side? Get me to know what's your perception of the suckler farming? You get me? Because it's on the same page. To get me to know, should it be on the same page, or what do you think, Lynn? You know?
I'll go first. We raise shorthorns and specifically because they're more dual purpose. So again, our system is very old, and I'm sure that lads can speak more to your system, but it's looking again at the robusticity of the animal, and so we raise a few of them for beef because we can choose to put it into a beef bowl or a dairy bowl, that sort of way. So I think, I know that they're pitting them against each other, and that's the way it's gone a lot, but they don't necessarily have to be either. It's just that we've tried to efficientize everything so much. We tried to separate everything so much that you just have dairy cows. Again, specificity over diversity is really what has caused that sort of, and that's my opinion, but.
Yeah, a bit the same as the short term there. We focus a lot on a small, medium-sized kind of old-style Frisian cows. So we put a fierce value on our calves and our cows. So because our farm is fragmented, we keep all the calves, and we have those for sale for stores then for the following year. So it's not just milk. But yeah, I definitely think, you know, a lot of people are getting hung up on diets, and you know, and like the suckler herd has a part to play in that, you know, for high quality beef and things. But like the perception at the moment is people are eating too much beef, but I don't know, are they? Like, we wouldn't. I never ate red meat every day of the week, but that's what we're being told. And if you go back to Ireland in the 50s and the 60s, we the fittest race in Europe. And what did they live on? Only a balanced diet of meat and a bit of veg, and that was it. And now I think there seems to be an obesity problem, but yet meat has been targeted as the main cause of that, which I think is a bit untrue at times, but that's my little rant on beef.
I would say that in the way that you have to have, I think, an animal finished within so many months, I think that's I'll be honest, I think it's wrong because you're pushing, and when you push anything, it's stressed, and it's the feed, it's the GMO in the feed. You could list it all off. It's less is more. Your costs, cut down your costs, and try and produce a more nutritious grass if you can. Sucklers, everyone, every animal in this country has a role to play, because I think that's the cycle, because the cow does its thing, it eats the grass, and that's the cycle. So we all have a role to play, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and just I'd come in. I think like the fact that even sucklers, dairy farms, tillage, forestry, the fact that all these segregation, it's like a symptom of this kind of reductionist approach to agriculture and climate change and all of these things, and where like this focus on efficiency, and it's so, I think the whole thing, it's pointing to a much deeper problem, I think, that we have to get our heads around. And you know, obviously a suckler cow can fit into a healthy environment just like a dairy cow or just like a tree can. They all have their role, but the questions maybe are about how we do it, and not as opposed to suckler versus dairy or forestry versus grassland. Or yeah. So you can have a healthy system of any of these farming. Yeah.
Anyone else? That man over there?
I want to ask Hannah about species with spores, and you know, something that they're trying in the last couple of years. What's your feedback on the species with spores, please?
Yeah, well, sure, I'll start. So I suppose the first multi-species sward I sowed was in 2015, and I from Cotswold seed, so it was quite a species-rich mix. And I have been, up until even last year, I've been still sowing them. I suppose I've slightly changed my approach a little bit on them now, in that, look, I think they have a huge role to play. They had a big role to play, maybe even in the type of farm where I was, where all my ground was like kind of lay ground that had been ploughed within you know, it was originally a mixed farm, so there was a tillage rotation. So diversity would have been limited on a lot of fields. But still, I think there's limitations. I think there's this kind of idea that diversity is good at any cost, but like where it's not always the case, I suppose. It's sometimes having the right plants in the right place is more important. And so we can just superimpose all this diversity onto a field, and it mightn't necessarily do any good. We might see that in 2 or 3 years' time that 90% of it's gone. And so I think it's actually more about getting our management systems to actually encourage diversity and encourage kind of maybe a more natural, diversity that can actually withstand and stay in place and benefit the soil. And I think so I think like multi-species swards can have a huge role in opening farmers up to the potential of diversity. But yeah, I think it's only a stepping stone, maybe.
I had a slightly technical question on that, actually, just some MSS. In terms of, I've seen your grassland and it's very lush, and yet when they say when you're reseeding MSS or when you're clover or anything like that, that you need to hammer the grass essentially to give the other crops a chance to come up. So how did you find it then balancing, because you don't seem to graze very tightly like most traditional dairy farmers would?
Yeah, so I suppose for the last few years I've been doing kind of holistic management, holistic planned grazing. This year I'm actually doing a different type of grazing again. So, and the reality is, no matter, anytime you do anything different, you will probably encourage certain species will thrive and other species will. So it's hard to say there's a right or wrong in how you manage this. But yeah, so within holistic planned grazing, I was finding on certain plants that it was kind of reverting just to, it was suiting certain diversity, like chicory will do really well, ribgrass was doing relatively well, red clover can do well, you'll have a level of white clover. This year I'm doing a different type of grazing. It's more kind of like continuous grazing, which is probably a bit sacrilege. But it's actually, for me, it's slightly more natural system of grazing, and I'm finding other plants like birds with trefoil are doing better and much more yarrow. And yeah, just chicory still doing well, ribgrass still do well, and all the clovers do even a lot better again. And so again, it's just management will dictate the type of diversity that emerges. Tom,
you wanted to pop in?
I would say, in my opinion, that I I think it's another cost that they're going to throw at farmers that you don't have to do, because I believe that if you stop spreading nitrogen or urea in your ground, there's a seed bank there and that'll grow eventually. The cows will go to wherever they want to eat. And I believe that, you know, in time it all comes true, and in 3 years in my place it's turned upside down, where I was just all Italian, I won't even call it, you know, that grass, and basically everything has come back. It's another cost, you don't have to do it. I actually did 2 fields, and I said it to Chris, and he said, "What are you at? Why are you spending your family's money?" You know, the seed bank is there, treat the soil, it'll come itself. End of story. That's my opinion.
Bridget, is there a question there?
It's actually a woman's question, but seeing as dairy's all about women, and well, it's the female cows anyway, so we can just take it from that perspective. Hannah, we're delighted to see the Women in Ag group that you're leading, taking forward the issue of numbers of women in farming and that. And unfortunately, your group only recognises, is working with women from the recognised stakeholder groups. And I was wondering if Mimi had any ideas around what the agroecological perspective could bring to the table. Do you know what I mean? The permaculture, the regenerative farmer, whether there's a value there as well for that perspective to come through.
Yeah, so to give people some background, I wasn't going to talk about this because I talk about it a lot. So I have a passion to make sure that women in agriculture are represented. Only 12% of farmers in the country are meant to be women, but that's not true. That would only be about 16,000 farmers. Actually, the CSO stats show that there are 70,000 women getting up every single day and helping out on farms, and 40,000 of those are wives, and yet they don't receive any official recognition, and they don't get any of the farm payments. 90% of the payments that we get from Brussels goes to one gender, and that gender is men. So in light of that, about 3 months ago, I reached out to farm organisations because I felt like nothing was being done, and I'm one of those people who gets fed up of talking. I'm talking now, I know, and just wants to do things. So I rang up all the farm organisations that I knew in my role as a journalist. I asked them all, would they all put forward a representative? And they did, and we managed to put a stakeholders group together. We managed to get a CAP submission in. Bear in mind the CAP plan for Ireland has to be in by January. It was a very tight turnaround. We managed to get in front of the Oireachtas Agricultural Committee. And I got news this week that amazingly and very proudly as well, 2 of our policies, 2 of the really important ones in terms of giving women an option of female-only knowledge transfer groups, and the second one, less than 4% of TAMS, which is the farm machinery, farm buildings, money went to women. So we wanted a 60% grant for women over 40, essentially for the wives, so that there would be an incentive to bring them on officially on farms. So it looks like someone leaked me a document very kindly from a meeting that we have got those 2 things in the national plan for Ireland, which is quite emotional for me because I feel like it's going to make a difference to those 70,000 women. And what Bridget is alluding to is that we have the IFA, the ICSA, the ICMSA, Macra na Firma, the Irish Organic Association, the INHFA, and then I was worried that some women wouldn't be represented in that. So we have West Women in Farming and South East Women in Farming. And Bridget, I know Talamh Bio did reach out and wanted to be a part of that group as well. And it wasn't that we were ignoring Talamh Bio. I had a very long conversation with Breda on that, and I'm happy to talk again on that. But in the context of it and how tight the turnaround was, I'm very open to having Talamh Bio on the stakeholders group, but at the minute my main focus is just to get as much done for women as possible in the next couple of months. So I'm always open to new members, but at the minute I just need to crack on and try and get everything I can done in the next couple of months. And I would say that all farmers, no matter what organisation you're affiliated with or where you are, we all come in different shapes and sizes and sounds. And in this context, in this modern age, we should all be environmentally focused. And I would hope that all the stakeholders have that in mind. So I hope that's all right. Is there anyone else who wants to ask a question to the panel?
Can I just finish on that? the herbal swards and the lays, right? Once you produce a nutritious grass, you won't need them, in my opinion.
Anybody else? Darina, do you want to ask a question?
I just, from the point of view of beef and the flavour of beef and eating, is there any way that one can actually identify beef that has been a suckler beef, you know, which I think in many ways has extra attributes as far as the eating quality is concerned when it gets to the butcher or however you actually manage to buy it? That's one thing there. And also another thing that sort of has been worrying me for quite a while from the Ireland Inc. point of view, and Ireland, the Green Food Island and all of that, is there actually yet a definition of what grass-fed beef is, or grass-fed anything, because we really do trade on this, and I worry about it. I mean, what exactly is the definition? Often the perception is that the animals are grass-fed all the time, and I think we could be sitting on a time bomb there if that goes up.
Well, Glenisk seem to have formed a grass-fed milk label, which is quite impressive, and they seem to be marketing it to to the German market. Is that it?
Are you inspected for it?
Yeah. So Glenisk have a standard drawn up with the Irish Organic Association, but it is a very valid point, because grass-fed can mean so many different things. So like Glanbia will obviously have their own version of what grass-fed is, and there's a big question: is all of this beyond where the average consumer, you know, it's just a step too far? Like, it's hard enough to even sell organic as it stands, or free range versus, you know, all of these labels, I suppose, are, what do they mean? You know, how can you communicate this on a carton of milk or on a slice of meat, like to customers? Like, you know, they have to. There's a level of trust here, and when people see grass-fed, you know, it's hard to. Is there 100% grass-fed? Is it 90% grass-fed? It's a tricky one, I think.
In America, they've had a definition which says a certain number of days on grass. Obviously, it's going to vary depending on the year and the climate, but they have had that in America for quite a while. It might be just something that I just worry about. Whatever it is, it doesn't necessarily have to be they're out 365 days a year, but it needs to be clear what we're talking about, I think, because otherwise we're leaving ourselves open to actually, you know...
I think Board Bia have a standard too. Yeah.
And I think Clive and the Organic Trust brought in...
Yeah, the pasture-fed as well.
Yeah, which is the UK certification, which is 100%. Yeah. Now again, it's another certification that people have to go through to get it. You know that, but they're trying to make that. Yeah, they're trying to make that, I think, the Irish 100% grass-fed certification.
You're not going to finish an animal on, like a suckler, you're not going to finish an animal on grass within the time period, and that's the problem. So it's higher than us, that's the problem, as we all know.
But interestingly as well, when you go into ABP to send your cattle off, you have to tick a form, and there's a box, and you have to tick it, and it does say grass-fed to grass has the cow been grass-fed, essentially.
And where do you get your feed or whatever?
Yeah, as well.
Yeah, just with Dairy Gold, your milk supply agreement is for the grass-based, it's a minimum of 180 days of grass, and if you can't get out for 180 days, you're in breach of your agreement, and the co-op won't collect your milk. So, and I think some co-ops have gone further now, and they're regarding zero graze grass as kind of grade 2 milk, that it's not pasture fed. So a lot of the guys that have gone down the zero grazing route, they're going to be in a spot of bother with milk price going down the line, because even though it's grass, it's not really grazed grass, like, so that's coming down the line as well.
Do you have any last question to finish off? One down there, yeah. Oh, and then Brendan, yeah.
The two types of milk are in the same column. Whereas, to me, organic milk is a higher quality. You know, there might be 20 cent in the price at the moment in the two types, but it's not been, into its own section there. And, what do the panel think of that? I know Minnie, she's gone straight to the consumer, so she is getting the markup. But I just think the milk isn't being promoted enough, and to get more farmers to go organic, I think that's the price needs to go up, and I think you will get paid for it. It's just been like dumbed down in these multiples, and I think there's more markup, there's more money to be made on it, and to be passed on to the farmers, and just maybe if it could be increased 10 cents to the farmers, you probably would get a much more uptake in the organic milk.
Yeah, I think organic beef and dairy farmers would probably agree, whether it's per litre or per kilo. But yeah, would you guys feel like there should be more? Of course you do.
Yeah. Well, I suppose that's a tricky thing. Of course, it's very obviously multiple supermarkets. That's their nature. They're all once it's a commodity, they're going to drive the price down. Conventional farmers would say the same thing if we could get a bit more. So every farmer would say that. And there's a bigger question about tied in with that too, is in the affordability. Is all the problems within agriculture a problem of just farmers not getting enough? And if we all got paid more, could we farm more sustainably and environmentally friendly? And I don't really think that is the answer either, because are we going to make food just unaffordable for more people, or make society more the haves and the have-nots? So I think there's a deeper question in that as well. I think this is a byproduct of commoditizing food, and that's, we're always going to have problems. If you pay more for it, you're going to create a problem somewhere else.
We have undervalued food as well. As a society, we spend so much less of our disposable income on food, percentage-wise, than we used to in the 1950s or 60s, because we expect everything to be cheap. With the 49-cent carrots and the liter of organic milk, that's become an expectation. So I'm not for pricing out of people's prices. I think everybody should have access to local, nutritious, organic, if they want it, food. But if you're doing that and the consumer isn't paying a price that is going to support the person who's producing it, then that entire cycle is broken to begin with.
Yeah.
So.
And we waste a third of everything we produce. I'll come to you first, but can I just quickly, we're running over time, so just to wrap up and to give me your kind of reflections for ahead, because there have been a lot of protests in the media, and I'm wondering if you feel positive or negative about the future, but I'll start with Tom and go ahead there.
Just on the last point, I'd like to say it's educational that, media portrays as if we've saved €400 this month on food, like, what are you at? Because basically if you save on your nutrition longer down the road, I know this is going off topic a small, but it's the same thing, pay a bit extra, way more nutritious food, a lot healthier gut, everything like that, and you won't have to pay for a doctor then later on in life. That's the last thing. On what was the last question?
Your reflection.
Positive or negative?
My reflection is life-changing. Actually, I wouldn't be here today only for what I've done, and that's a fact, because I'd like to thank my wife, Nikki, and the two girls. I'd like to thank Chris Trump, Master Cho, Korean Natural Farming, everyone that has put me on this road, and I believe that we are a serious nation, and there's one thing I'd like to say is that, what's the thing? We're all scientists in a way, because we're farmers, and science is the study of nature through observation and observation and Nick, please. Yeah. Yes, and basically as a farmer, that's what we do. And we are scientists because we look at nature every day of the week. We know what we're doing. And I will give you one small bit of advice. Don't follow your head, follow your gut. And if you follow your gut, you'll do an amazing job on whatever system you do.
Okay. John, will you go along in that direction?
So I suppose looking forward, I think overall I would definitely feel positive, but I think that's in our openness to change, I suppose. And that I think I think it will be a very negative experience in the coming years for a lot of farmers, because we will see a lot of systems and ways of doing things falling away, and it'll be a challenging time, I think, because it's very hard to let go of these things. But I think ultimately there will be something better might come out of it all.
Mimi?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I'm an optimist. You wouldn't continue to do this every day if you were dismal about it, I don't think. There's great potential within Ireland as well. I mean, coming from the States, to me, it just seems unmanageable. And to me, Ireland just looks like it has such the capacity as an island, you know, to do so much if there is sort of system-wide change. And again, change is hard. Change is always hard, but it can be, you know, it's growth as well. So yeah, I'm an optimist. You have to be.
Yeah. I suppose I'm the same. I'm fierce optimistic, but I suppose what hurts the most is a lot of the negativity towards agriculture in the media. Like we're doing our best. Like we, you know, when you take the farming system, you know, we get a lot of rain in this country. It grows the grass. The cows eat the grass. They produce the milk. We use their manure then to fertilise the soil. Like it's a cycle, and like you know, we're being targeted in as the main emitters of pollution, which like every industry has its part to play, but at times it just feels like it's all targeted toward agriculture. While you know that's fine, we can reduce the national herd here, but like will other industries reduce there? Like we'll say just take a car dealership. Will he be told now you can't sell as many cars now because we want to reduce the amount of emissions on the production of cars and stuff? Like you know, it needs to be across the board, and I think at times farming or agriculture is just targeted as the easy option. And you know, like the panel that are here today, they're proof that you know that change can be done, and that we're not having the same impact that the media think. And just on change, like it's policy that will drive change. Because I just give you an example now. I have a friend of mine now, and we're both on the same ethos of farming, and he had a few corners of his fields that he couldn't cut, or he couldn't you know, they were unproductive. So he set a few groves of trees around the farm, and he got a cross-compliance inspection, and he was penalised. And your man says, why are you penalising me? Oh, sure, that's not productive land. And so he had to turn around in and take out those groves of trees and put it back into grass so he'd keep his payment. And the same story on my farm. If just for argument's sake, I was let the ragwort get out of control, or thistles or whatever, and I had a cross-compliance, I'd get a penalty. So like that has to change as well. Like that, it's okay to, you know, you can't deem all land as super productive. Like you have to, you know, if you give nature a space, it'll take over. Like that's what I'd finish on.
I think that's a good note to finish on. Thank you very much.